everyone! For today's video, we are going to talk about the Interactionist theory cognitive development. But before we start, let me introduce myself first and to my co-reporters, Donald Mansha. My name is Jicalyn Lipayaw Upidor from BEd Section 1A. Before we proceed to our discussion about the key concept and stages of cognitive development, let us know who is the proponent of this theory. I will show you a picture and you will try to recognize who is he. I will give you 3 seconds to recognize him. Yes, he is Jean Piaget and he is the proponent of cognitive development theory. Jean Piaget was born in Switzerland year 1896. He is a Swiss researcher who was trained as a biologist and naturalist and became interested first in children's reasoning process and later in their moral development, judgment about ordinary happenings, and language. For his work with child, he is associated with cognitive development theory, which describes a universal pattern of learning to think logically. Jean Piaget was also an epistemologist. When we are talking epistemology, it is a branch of philosophy that is concerned with the origin, nature, extent, and limits of human knowledge. Today, he is known for his research on children's cognitive development, which suggests that people actively construct their knowledge of the world based on the interactions between their ideas and their experiences. What is cognitive development? Cognitive development is the construction of thought processes including remembering, problem-solving, and decision-making from childhood to adolescence to adulthood. It also refers to how a person perceives, thinks, and gains understanding of his or her world through the interaction of genetic and learned factors. Jean Piaget's cognitive development theory is truly a classic in the field of educational psychology. This theory focuses on how individuals construct their knowledge. According to Jean Piaget, cognitive development was a progressive reorganization of mental processes as a result of biological maturation and environmental experience. Children construct an understanding of the world around them, then experience discrepancies between what they already know and what they discover in their environment. This theory explained how a child constructs a mental model of the world based on their experiences. The goal of this theory is to explain the mechanism and processes by which the infant and then the child develop into an individual who can reason and think hypotheses. There are 3 basic components of Piaget's cognitive development: the schemas, assimilation and accommodation, and the Piaget's 4 stages cognitive development. Schema. A schema describes both the mental and physical actions involved understanding and knowing. It also referred to as the prior knowledge background on something. Schema refers to cognitive factors which individuals intellectually adapt to and organize their environment. Schemas are the basic building block of such cognitive models and enable us to form a mental representation of the world. Piaget defined the schema as a cohesive, repeatable action sequences processing component actions that are tightly interconnected and governed by a core meaning. In simple terms, Piaget called the schema the basic building block of intelligent behavior, a way of organizing knowledge. Wadsworth 2004 suggests that schemata, the plural of schema, be thought of as index cards filed in the brain. each on telling an individual how to teach incoming stimuli of information. Schema can also define us as a set of linked mental representations of the world, which we use both to understand and to respond to situations. The assumption is that we store mental representation and apply them when needed. Example: buying a meal in a restaurant, the schema is a stored form of the pattern of behavior which includes looking at a menu, ordering the food, eating it, and paying the bill. This is example of a type of schema called a script. Piaget believed that the newborn baby have a small number of innate schemas. They retrieve the schema from memory and apply it to the situations. Example: if a child sees a dog for the first time, he creates his own schema what a dog is it. It has four legs and a tail. In short, schema is an individual's way to understand or create meaning about thing or experience. Assimilation and accommodation. Jean Piaget viewed intellectual growth as a process of adaptation or adjustment to the world. This happened through assimilation, accommodation, and equilibrium. Assimilation. Assimilation is the process of taking a new information into our previously existing schema. Example: when a child first sees a Dalmatian dog, the child will interpret this information based on his or her existing mental frameworks and will label it to doggy. It means when child learn the word for dog, they start to call all four-legged animals to doggy. Accommodation. Accommodation is the process of creating a new schema. Involve altering existing schemas or ideas as result of new information or new experiences. This happens when the existing schema does not work and needs to be changed to deal with a new object or situation. Example: when the child saw a cow for the first time, she or he will assimilate it to her schema of doggy as four-legged animal. When the mother told her that it is a cow, she will accommodate this new information and refer to that animal as cow and not a doggy. The child will learn that not all four-legged animals is called doggy. Equilibration. When we are talking equilibration, it is achieving a proper balance between assimilation and accommodation. Piaget believed that the people have the natural need to understand how the world works and to find order, structures, and predictability in their life. As a children progress through the stages of cognitive development, it is important to maintain balance between applying previous knowledge or assimilation and changing behavior to amount for new knowledge or accommodation.
Good day, ma'am. Today, we are gonna talk about cognitive and interactionist theory, expresses by which children learn to understand and speak a language. Jean Piaget was famous for his four stages of cognitive development for children, which included the development of language. However, children do not think like adults, and so before they can begin to develop language, they must first actively construct their own understanding of the world around them. Okay, sensory motor stage. Birth to 2 years old. It is the first stage of your child's life. It is according to Jean Piaget's theory of child development. Characteristics of this stage include motor activity without use of symbols. As the child grows, he or she demonstrates intelligence through motor activity. During this period, children learn about the world by using senses to interact with their surroundings. However, infants' knowledge is limited. because it is based on their experiences through physical interactions. All things learned are based on experiences or trial and error. The infant learns about the world through their senses and through their actions, which involve moving around and exploring its environment. Also, a child learns by trial and error. For example, a child may try out different sounds or actions as a way of getting attention from a caregiver. Now, let's take a look at this picture. The children threw something on the floor and getting the attention of his caregiver. Therefore, the child perceived and identified that action can lead to the best or desired result. According to Piaget, developing object permanence is one of the most important accomplishments at the sensory motor stage. The term object permanence is used to describe a child's ability to know that objects continue to exist even though they can be no longer seen. Piaget hid a toy under a blanket while the child was watching. He observed whether or not the child searched for the hidden toy. Therefore, searching for the hidden toy was evidence for object permanence. To understand that objects continue to exist even they are unseen, child must develop a mental representation of the object. Therefore, once a child develops that language, development happens. Towards the end of this stage, the general symbolic functions begins to appear where children show in their play that they can use one object to stand for another. Language also starts to appear because they realize that words can be used to represent objects and feelings. Pre-operational stage, 2 to 7 years old. This stage roughly corresponding to the preschool stage. Intelligence is intuitive in nature. When we say intuitive, it means that children have now the ability to understand a thing without a proof or evidence. At this stage, the children can now make mental representations and is able to pretend. The child now ever closer to the use of symbols, meaning children are thinking at a symbolic level but are not yet using cognitive operations. This means the child at this stage cannot use yet logic of transform or combine or separate ideas. Symbolic function in this stage. We have now the what we call as pre-operational thought. First of those is symbolic function. Then what it is? This is the inability to represent objects and events. A symbol is a thing that represents something else. A drawing, a written word, or a spoken word comes to understood as representing a real object. Symbolic function gradually develop in the period between 2 to 7 years old. Gradually develops meaning unti-unting na de-develop. Furthermore, in symbolic function, they engage in pretend play. Example in the picture. Let's assume a 5-year-old boy who is pretending and imagining that he is riding a horse. The child using a broom as an object to represent the horse. At this moment of kids' life, they can play with objects that exist only in their minds. Therefore, if they are exposed on that thing, this is what will exist in their mind and is what they imitate during pretend play. Another pre-operational in this stage is the egocentrism. At this moment of children's life, they cannot take the perspective of the others. The child cannot understand the other's point of view. Example, when seeing the child's sister crying, a young child gives her his favorite stuffed toy to make her feel better. This shows that at this stage, the child lacks of logical reasoning. The main achievement of this stage is being able to attach meaning to objects with language. Concrete operational stage 8 to 11 still involves elementary school years. This stage is characterized by the ability of the child to think logically, much more successfully if they can manipulate real, concrete materials or pictures of them. A good example of this stage is seriation. There will be a point in child's intellectual development when she or she can compare objects with a speck of the size. Essentially, it is impossible for a child to voice concepts are unknown to them. This means if you give a child a number of sticks, they must first actively understand the concept. Therefore, once a child understands the concept, they can now acquire the particular language for which expresses that concept. Formal operational stage, 12 to adulthood. It is the period when logical thinking develop and utilize. Children can now solve abstract problems and can hypothesize. At this stage, children are able to reason about abstract concepts, think about consequences of potential actions, and are able to reason out what might occur. Also, Piaget thought this is where really sophisticated moral reasoning began to take place. Basically, at this point, children are reasoning more like adults and they continue to develop that over time. A hallmark characteristic of formal operational thinking is the ability to think the abstract idea and also the ideal. So for instance, we start to wonder about what we believe about our religion, about politics, and whether our parents told us are really beliefs that we told. At this point in development, thinking become much more sophisticated and advanced. Kids can think about abstract and theoretical concepts and use logic to come up with creative solutions to problems. Skills such as logical thought, deductive reasoning, and systematic planning also emerge on this stage.